Welcome to History Teller YT, where forgotten voices and untold stories come alive. Today, we embark on a journey that stretches far beyond maps and written books, back to a time when people looked not at compasses or satellites, but the eternal night sky for guidance. This is the story of the Subanen people, guardians of ancient wisdom, who saw the stars not as distant lights, but as ancestors, teachers, and guides. From planting rice to declaring marriages, from healing the sick to navigating rivers and mountains, every step of life was written in the heavens. Myths of hunters, lovers, and children who became stars reveal a universe alive with meaning, where destiny and morality were carved into constellations. In these chapters, you'll hear how eclipses became warnings, how comets carried prophecy, how leaders ruled only with the blessing of the skies, and how every man, woman, and child found their place in the eternal covenant between humanity and the cosmos. So stay with me until the end. What you are about to hear is more than history. It is a living testimony of how our ancestors understood life, death, and eternity, written not on paper, but on the canvas of the stars. Long before humankind had compasses, clocks, or satellites guiding their journeys, the night sky was their only reliable map. The great rivers and mountains shaped early settlements, but it was the sky that offered direction when everything else was uncertain. For the Subanen, also known as Subanen, the stars were not distant objects of burning gases, but living guides that whispered meanings to those who could read them. Each twinkling light was believed to carry a message from the spirits or from the ancestors who had once walked the earth. When night fell over the mountains of Mindanao, families sat together, elders pointing upward with bamboo sticks, teaching the younger ones which cluster meant safe harvest, which star marked the path of migration, and which celestial formation signaled the changing of seasons. It was not science in the modern sense. It was survival woven with belief, myth, and sacred duty. This practice mirrored the lives of many indigenous peoples around the world. But for the Subanen, it was something more intimate, a constant reminder that they were never alone. The heavens looked down on them, and they looked up to the heavens, finding order and meaning. The Subanen believed that the stars were not silent. Their patterns reflected harmony or discord in the human world. When a bright star seemed restless, flickering unusually, elders interpreted it as a sign of illness or conflict. When the sky was calm and the constellations clearly visible, people said that the spirits of the ancestors were blessing the community with peace. In this way, astronomy and spirituality were inseparable. Night after night, people returned to the sky, not only for navigation, but also for comfort. The boundless horizon reminded them that life was a journey connected to forces larger than any one person. This connection forged a unique identity, one where stars were more than lights. They were guardians, storytellers, and silent judges of human life. In the Subanen tradition, mythology was not entertainment. It was memory preserved through stories of the stars. One tale spoke of a hunter who disobeyed the spirits, chasing wild deer deep into the forest. Lost and frightened, he begged for mercy, and the ancestors lifted him into the sky where he became a star, forever warning others not to defy spiritual order. Another legend told of two lovers separated by rival families, their longing so deep that they were transformed into twin stars who could only meet when a moon was full. These stories ensured that the stars were never just physical. They were bridges between the human and the divine. In weddings, elders studied the stars to determine if the union would be blessed. During courtship, young men looked to the constellations, asking silently if their intentions would be approved by unseen powers. Even agriculture was synchronized with celestial rhythms. When a certain cluster rose before dawn, it was time to plant rice. When it disappeared, it was time to harvest. Every decision, from love to labor, was bound by the silent but commanding language of the heavens. The role of myth in this context was vital. Without written texts, oral tradition kept knowledge alive, and the stars were the eternal canvas on which these stories were painted. Young children memorized the patterns not just by names, but by the narratives tied to them. To forget a constellation's meaning was not only ignorance, it was disrespect toward the ancestors. Thus, astronomy became an anchor for identity. The Subanen did not separate life into compartments of science, religion, and culture. All were one, unified under the stars. For them, to live was to read the sky, and to read the sky was to live in harmony with both the earth beneath and the cosmos above. Through this lens, the stars became an ancient scripture, an unwritten holy book that guided every generation. Though unique in their customs, the Subanen were not alone in their reverence for the stars. Across the ancient world, civilizations also gave divine weight to the heavens. In Mesopotamia, priests mapped constellations to predict floods and wars. In Egypt, the rising of Sirius marked the flooding of the Nile, ensuring fertile soil. In Greece, philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato sought to explain cosmic harmony, blending mathematics with mysticism. What makes the Subanen distinct is not only their interpretation of the sky, but their integration of celestial observation into every layer of daily life. Governance itself was often tied to the stars. Leaders, called timue, consulted star readers before declaring festivals or settling disputes, believing that no decision could stand if it clashed with the rhythms of heaven. This gave politics a sacred weight, ensuring that leaders ruled not by human will alone, but with perceived cosmic approval. When Christian missionaries later arrived in Mindanao, they brought with them biblical stories of astrologers who followed a star to seek the child-born king of the Jews. For the Subanen, this was not strange, but familiar. They too believed that stars could lead travelers to truth. Yet the difference was subtle. While the Bible warned against astrologers as deceivers in some passages, the Subanen honored them as descendants of wise ancestors. Thus, the cultural collision did not erase the older traditions, but created layers of interpretation. Some saw the Christian star of Bethlehem as the same guiding spirit their forefathers once followed. Others continued to rely on their own cosmology. In both cases, the sky remained central, uniting old and new, myth and scripture, faith and reason. It is here, in this shared reverence for the heavens, that we begin the long journey into Subanen history, 20 parts of legacy written not on paper, but across the eternal canvas of the night sky. Among the Subanen people, the stars were not silent dots scattered across darkness. They were living voices, echoing the presence of ancestors who continued to watch over their descendants. Oral accounts passed through countless generations tell us that the Subanen believed the heavens were a meeting place between the world of the living and the world of spirits. When a child was born, elders looked upward, observing which stars were most visible at that time, interpreting whether the child would grow to be a hunter, a farmer, or perhaps a leader. This belief gave the night sky the role of destiny's architect, one that could not be ignored. During sickness, healers sometimes performed rituals beneath constellations associated with protection, whispering prayers that the stars would carry their requests to the unseen guardians above. In this way, astronomy was not simply about calculation. It was the spiritual medicine and moral compass of the tribe. The cultural weight of this worldview cannot be overstated. In communities without writing, knowledge depended on memory. Memory depended on images. And the greatest, most permanent images were the patterns of the stars. Unlike rivers that changed their course or forests that could be cut down, the constellations remained constant. The elders pointed upward and declared, "There is your book. It is written above." This sense of permanence offered both security and responsibility. If the stars witnessed everything, then no wrongdoing could escape judgment. If the stars granted blessings, then humans had to live in ways that honored that gift. Thus, morality itself became tied to the sky. To live in harmony with one's people meant to live in harmony with the universe. Though clothed in myths and legends, the Subanen system of star reading contained practical knowledge that ensured survival. Long before calendars, the tribe could predict seasons by observing which constellations rose at dusk or dawn. For instance, when certain bright stars appear before sunrise, it was the sign to prepare rice fields. If elders saw the same cluster dipping earlier in the evening, they knew the rains would soon arrive, signaling the harvest. This astronomical knowledge, embedded in narrative form, meant that even children could memorize crucial agricultural cycles while listening to bedtime stories. It was not mathematics on parchment, but it was no less accurate. Through repeated generations of observation, the Subanen learned to anticipate changes in weather, guiding their planting and hunting schedules with precision. Even governance drew from this star-based wisdom. Decisions about when to hold community gatherings or when to enforce periods of rest often came after consultation with those trained to read the sky. A Timue chief who ignored the stars risked losing the trust of his people. It was understood that leadership was not only a social role, but also a cosmic responsibility. If the leader acted against the harmony of the heavens, disaster might follow: drought, conflict, or disease. This belief preserved balance, discouraging leaders from arrogance. The stars reminded everyone, even chiefs, that human power was temporary, while cosmic order was eternal. In this sense, Subanen astronomy was both democratic and sacred. It demanded humility from rulers and obedience from the community, uniting them under the shared authority of the heavens. When we compare Subanen's star traditions with those of other ancient peoples, a fascinating pattern emerges. Just as the Babylonians used constellations to predict political events, and just as the Polynesians navigated the Pacific using star maps woven into memory, the Subanen also carried their survival and identity through stellar observation. What sets them apart is how seamlessly they blended practicality with spirituality. In the West, astronomy eventually separated from astrology, becoming a purely scientific field. But in the Subanen worldview, no such division existed. The star that guided planting was also the star that carried ancestral blessings. The constellation that warned of war also told the story of forbidden lovers. Every observation carried both a physical and spiritual dimension. This holistic vision made Subanen astronomy deeply human. It was not about controlling the universe, but about finding one's place within it. In the evenings, entire families would gather around fires, looking skyward, their lives illuminated not only by flames, but also by the glitter of constellations above. In those moments, the Subanen were not separate from the cosmos. They were participants in its grand design. Compared to modern societies, where light pollution often hides the stars and people rarely look upward, the Subanen world was profoundly connected. The night sky was their calendar, their compass, their storybook, their law, and their prayer. It is through this connection that we understand why they considered themselves, in many ways, descendants of astrologers, people whose lives were inseparable from the eternal rhythms of the heavens. In Subanen society, love was never only a matter between two individuals. It was a union that involved families, communities, and even the stars themselves. Courtship was a sacred process guided by customs and careful observation of celestial signs. When a young man desired to pursue a woman, his family would not rush blindly into proposals. Instead, they consulted elders who studied the heavens. Which constellation was dominant on the night of the proposal? Was the moon waxing or waning? Was Venus, the bright evening star, visible, shining as a symbol of harmony and fertility? These questions shaped the timing and direction of relationships. If the signs were favorable, the union was encouraged. If not, families often delayed the process, believing that rushing against the stars invited misfortune. Marriage ceremonies themselves reflected this cosmological awareness. Some rituals were deliberately held under particular constellations, aligning the vows of the couple with the eternal rhythms above. The elders taught that if two people married when the stars were in harmony, their relationship would inherit that harmony. The belief extended even to practical matters. Fertility, the health of children, and the prosperity of future harvests were all tied to the cosmic moment of the wedding. Thus, the heavens were more than witnesses. They were active participants in human love. This gave Subanen marriages a dimension rarely appreciated in modern society. While today couples may choose dates for convenience, the Subanen chose them for destiny. Their unions were written not on paper, but across the stars, inscribed in patterns that shone down every night. The lesson was simple yet profound. Love without harmony with the cosmos was incomplete, but love sanctified by the heavens was eternal. For a people living close to the soil, the success of agriculture meant the difference between abundance and famine. Subanen farmers did not rely on mechanical calendars or written timetables. Their calendar was the sky. When the Pleiades cluster appeared on the horizon just before dawn, it was the sign to begin clearing fields for planting. When those same stars sank into the western sky, it marked the time of harvest. In this way, the tribe maintained an unbroken cycle of survival guided entirely by celestial patterns. The elders preserved this knowledge with great care, embedding it into chants, riddles, and stories so that no generation would forget. Even children could point at the stars and tell whether it was planting or harvesting season. This star-based agricultural system was not superstition, but an effective science rooted in centuries of observation. The constellations acted as seasonal markers, accurately predicting rainfall and drought long before modern meteorology existed. Because agriculture was communal, the stars also promoted unity. Whole villages prepared their fields together when the heavens declared it was time. In addition, rituals of thanksgiving were timed with celestial events. When the harvest moon rose large and golden, families gathered to thank both the earth and the heavens for their generosity. These ceremonies blended practical survival with spiritual devotion, reminding everyone that farming was not merely labor, but sacred participation in a cosmic cycle. In this way, Subanen agriculture was as much about worship as it was about food. To grow rice was to honor the earth, and to honor the earth was to honor the stars that gave light to its rhythms. Leadership among the Subanen was never absolute. Chiefs, known as Timue, held authority, but their power was balanced by the belief that they too were accountable to the stars. Before declaring judgments, initiating warfare, or calling for great gatherings, the Timue often sought the guidance of star readers. If the constellations aligned unfavorably, decisions were postponed. This practice ensured that governance was not simply human ambition, but harmonized with cosmic will. A leader who ignored the stars was not only seen as reckless, but also as spiritually corrupt. The stars acted as silent arbiters of justice, reminding leaders that power had limits, and those limits were written in the heavens. The practical effect of this system was remarkable. By consulting the stars, leaders naturally created periods of peace and waiting, reducing impulsive conflicts. They also gained legitimacy. People trusted decisions that seemed endorsed by the cosmos. The law itself was described as part of a sacred order, reflecting not just social agreements, but divine patterns mirrored above. For example, disputes over land boundaries were sometimes settled at night under constellations associated with balance and truth. In these moments, the stars were imagined as impartial witnesses, ensuring that both parties respected the resolution. Governance thus became less about domination and more about maintaining harmony with the universe. When we view this through a modern lens, it might appear poetic rather than practical. Yet for the Subanen, it was the foundation of stability. By aligning leadership with the stars, they embedded checks and balances into their culture, preventing absolute rule. The heavens were the constitution that could not be amended. This cosmic perspective ensured that society flowed not in chaos, but in rhythm, just as predictable as the rising and setting of constellations. The Subanen lived not under the tyranny of men, but under the enduring sovereignty of the stars. For the Subanen, ceremonies were never fully complete unless the heavens were invited as honored guests. Whether it was the initiation of youth into adulthood, the solemn rituals of healing, or the grand celebrations of harvest, the stars and moon dictated both timing and meaning. Elders, who carried the authority of tradition, began by observing the constellations on the nights leading to the event. If the patterns appeared clear and harmonious, the rituals proceeded with joy. If the sky was clouded or the stars appeared restless, ceremonies were delayed or restructured, for to begin without the cosmos' blessing was believed to invite disaster. These choices reflected more than superstition. They demonstrated an unbroken dialogue between human community and the infinite expanse above. During weddings, the participants often stood facing the sky at crucial moments, pledging not only to one another, but also to the watching ancestors in the heavens. For funerals, mourners lifted their eyes, believing the soul would ascend into the patterns of the night, becoming one with the eternal script written above. Even healing rituals involved astronomy. When an illness persisted, healers sometimes sought nights when certain stars, thought to embody protective spirits, were visible. They burned herbs and prayed beneath these constellations, believing the cosmic forces would grant renewed vitality. Each of these practices demonstrates how the Subanen did not divide life into sacred and secular. Every human action resonated in both earthly and cosmic dimensions, giving ceremonies an eternal weight. Stories within the Subanen tradition often portrayed the stars as messengers, bridges between the mortal world and the unseen realm. One tale tells of a great famine when crops withered and streams dried. The people despaired until one night a young woman dreamed of a radiant star speaking to her, telling her the direction of hidden water sources. When she guided her community to that place, they found flowing streams, enough to save the entire settlement. Such stories reminded everyone that the cosmos was not indifferent. It communicated with those humble enough to listen. In times of conflict, leaders sought guidance not only through advisors, but also through the constellations. If two stars were seen approaching closely, it was interpreted as a sign of coming unity or peace. If they seemed to drift apart, elders warned of looming division. This belief in celestial messages shaped the emotional life of the tribe. Lovers, separated by distance or doubt, would look at the same star cluster and feel reassured that the universe recognized their bond. Parents, anxious for sons who traveled to hunt or trade, prayed that a guiding star would accompany their journey. To modern eyes, these practices might seem symbolic, but for the Subanen, they were living truths. Each bright point of light was a sentence in an ongoing dialogue, written not in ink, but in radiance. This connection offered comfort in uncertainty, courage in adversity, and humility in triumph. To ignore the sky's voice was unthinkable, for silence itself was a message. One of the most vivid expressions of Subanen cosmology came during their night festivals, gatherings filled with music, dance, and ritual storytelling. These events were not merely social. They were deliberate attempts to synchronize the human community with the larger rhythms of the universe. The festival grounds often opened with dances performed under a full moon, accompanied by drums and bamboo instruments that echoed the heartbeat of the earth. As flames from torches flickered, elders narrated ancestral myths tied to the stars, reminding the younger generation of their place in both history and cosmos. The community celebrated not just life on Earth, but the invisible harmony above, reinforcing the belief that joy was only complete when aligned with celestial order. The festivals also had political and moral dimensions. A timue or respected elder might rise during the gathering and announce decisions, timed with visible celestial events to ensure acceptance. For example, if the stars signaled fertility and abundance, leaders might declare new seasons of planting or even the beginning of a marriage season. The night sky itself became a stage, with humans performing their part as actors beneath its canopy. This sense of cosmic theater gave meaning to every movement, every song, and every word spoken in the festival. The Subanen celebrated, but they also reaffirmed their deep covenant with the universe. Their joy was not escape from reality, but participation in the highest order of reality, the eternal harmony of Earth, humanity, and stars. In the worldview of the Subanen people, the night sky was more than a collection of lights. It was the very architecture of balance, a reflection of how the human world must remain in harmony with the cosmic order. Life was not seen as random or chaotic. It was structured, with every event on Earth echoing patterns written above. When a child was born, elders looked upward and declared that the child's destiny was marked by the stars shining that night. A bright and stable constellation meant a future of peace and abundance, while turbulent skies suggested struggle and sacrifice. This belief system instilled both caution and reverence in the people, reminding them that every action carried universal consequences. The Subanen saw themselves as part of a grand chain, connected to the earth beneath their feet, to the ancestors in the spirit world, and to the stars above. If one link was broken, if a person acted selfishly, if a leader ruled unjustly, if rituals were neglected, the cosmic order could collapse, bringing calamities such as drought, famine, or disease. For this reason, daily life was filled with rituals of respect, offering food to ancestral spirits, aligning activities with lunar phases, and observing taboos designed to maintain equilibrium. This was not merely religion, but a philosophy of existence, teaching that humans were neither masters nor slaves of the universe, but participants in its rhythm. By living in balance, the Subanen believed they secured both earthly prosperity and spiritual continuity, ensuring that their descendants would inherit a world still blessed by the heavens. The Subanen also believed that the stars were silent judges, witnessing human actions and reflecting divine approval or disapproval through their patterns. At night, when elders looked to the constellations, They often spoke of how the heavens revealed truths that human eyes could not see. If a leader abused power, the stars might appear clouded or restless, a warning to the community. If peace reigned and people acted with kindness, the constellations shone brightly, as if smiling on the tribe. This belief ensured that morality was never just personal. It was communal and cosmic. Wrongdoing could not be hidden in secrecy, for the stars themselves were witnesses, and sooner or later, their judgment would manifest in natural or social upheaval. In teaching children, elders used the stars as living lessons in ethics. They pointed to constellations shaped like hunters, lovers, or animals, telling stories where arrogance led to downfall and humility led to reward. These tales instilled virtues of respect, patience, and generosity. For example, one tale warned of a man who mocked the stars, declaring himself greater than their light. Soon after, storms destroyed his fields, and he vanished into obscurity. Such narratives carried moral lessons, reminding listeners that human pride was dangerous in a universe governed by cosmic law. Thus, the stars functioned not only as guides for agriculture or navigation, but also as the eternal moral compass of the Subanen. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Subanen cosmology was the belief that destiny itself was inscribed in the heavens. When people gazed upward, they did not see randomness, but a map of their own futures. Courtships, marriages, harvests, and even conflicts were believed to follow cycles determined by the stars. This worldview did not eliminate human choice, but it framed choices within a larger destiny. To act in harmony with the stars was to flow with destiny. To act against them was to invite tragedy. In this sense, the Subanen philosophy was both empowering and humbling. People felt guided, never entirely lost, yet they were constantly reminded that their lives were part of a story larger than themselves. Leaders used this belief to foster unity. By declaring that the stars supported a decision, a Timue could strengthen community trust, for the decision seemed validated not by human ambition, but by cosmic design. Parents reassured anxious children by pointing to constellations and saying, "Your path is already lit." Farmers planted with confidence when the heavens aligned, believing that destiny favored their labor. Even in times of suffering, the stars offered hope, for they taught that hardship too was part of a greater cycle, destined to pass into renewal. In this way, the Subanen transformed the night sky into a vast manuscript of destiny, one that could be read with patience, humility, and faith. Their culture thrived not by resisting fate, but by aligning with it, living every moment as though the stars themselves had written their story. Within the Subanen society, one of the most respected figures was the Balian or Manjon, the spiritual guide who understood the messages of the stars. These men and women were not casual observers. They were trained from childhood to memorize constellations, lunar cycles, and the seasonal movement of planets across the night sky. Their education was not written in books, but carved into memory through chants, riddles, and endless nights of watching the heavens. Often, a child destined to be a star reader was identified early, perhaps born during a rare celestial event or showing unusual attentiveness to the sky. Once chosen, the child was guided by elders, sitting for hours under the open heavens, learning to see patterns that others overlooked. The authority of these star readers extended across every layer of life. They were consulted before marriages, planting seasons, and even the settlement of disputes. When hunters prepared for expeditions, they sought the blessing of the star reader, who checked whether the constellations promised abundance or danger. Their interpretations carried weight because they were not seen as opinions, but as revelations, truths granted by the ancestors and confirmed by the cosmic order. Even the Timue, the chief, could not ignore their counsel. To govern against the wisdom of the heavens was to risk rebellion from both people and nature. This elevated the star readers to a position of moral guardianship, ensuring that their society's actions aligned with both tradition and celestial law. What made these figures unique was their humility. They did not claim personal power, but spoke as interpreters of something greater. Their role was to remind the community that human life was part of an infinite design. In doing so, they maintained balance, preventing leaders from arrogance and ordinary people from despair. By turning eyes constantly to the sky, they kept the Subanen grounded in both humility and hope. The Subanen were acutely aware that knowledge unpassed was knowledge lost. For this reason, elders emphasized teaching the younger generation about the stars, embedding cosmology into daily life. Children grew up hearing bedtime stories that doubled as astronomy lessons. A tale about a hunter becoming a star was not just myth. It was a way to remember a constellation's position and season. A legend about lovers united in the heavens taught children to recognize twin stars appearing in certain months. By linking story with science, the Subanen ensured that even the youngest members of the tribe could read the sky like a book. Education in this context was communal. Elders gathered children during festivals or quiet nights, pointing to the heavens and asking them to identify constellations. Those who answered correctly were praised, while mistakes were gently corrected with stories and humor. This method made learning joyful and sacred, for it was not merely memorizing, but participating in the ancestral dialogue with the cosmos. The role of parents was also crucial. Mothers often reminded their children to look for certain stars before planting vegetables or fetching water at night. Fathers guided sons during hunting, teaching which constellations pointed to north or which rising stars predicted animal migrations. Thus, knowledge was never locked in temples or schools. It was alive in the household, the fields, and the forest. This approach gave Subanen society resilience. Even if war, disease, or migration scattered the people, the knowledge remained portable, written in the stars themselves, and carried in memory. Unlike scrolls that could burn or monuments that could crumble, the constellations could never be destroyed. By training every generation to read them, the Subanen guaranteed continuity of wisdom, identity, and survival. Yet with such knowledge came responsibility. The star readers and elders understood that their words shaped destiny. A single misinterpretation could lead to failed harvests, broken marriages, or unnecessary conflicts. This moral burden was heavy, and those who bore it lived with caution. They often fasted before making major pronouncements, purifying themselves so that their vision would be clear. They avoided arrogance, reminding themselves that they were only interpreters of ancestral wisdom, not inventors of truth. Those who failed in this responsibility were remembered with shame, their names fading into silence, while faithful readers of the stars were honored for generations. This burden also extended to everyday people. To ignore the guidance of the stars was considered reckless, even dangerous. A farmer who planted against celestial signs risked not only his own failure, but the well-being of the entire community. A leader who dismissed the star reader's warning could bring disaster upon his people. Thus, knowledge created accountability. The heavens demanded obedience, but not through fear alone. They demanded it through reverence, reminding the people that life was fragile and could only flourish when aligned with universal harmony. Through this delicate system, the Subanen maintained both humility and order. Knowledge was never hoarded, but shared, never used for personal gain, but for communal stability. The moral weight of astronomy ensured that wisdom was sacred, truth was communal, and destiny was collective. In this way, the teachers of the stars did not simply preserve culture. They preserved the very soul of the people. Before maps, compasses, or modern technology, the Subanen relied on the heavens to guide them across the rugged mountains and winding rivers of Mindanao. At night, when the forest trails grew uncertain, it was the stars that showed the direction of home. Elders taught younger generations that certain constellations always pointed north, while others traced the seasonal paths of migration. Traders who traveled from village to village used the stars to calculate distance, measuring how far they had walked by the rising and setting of bright stars along the horizon. For hunters, this knowledge was vital. Following the stars ensured they did not lose their way in the thick jungle, where landmarks easily disappeared. The stars also shaped the rhythm of long journeys. If a constellation associated with danger rose high in the sky, travelers delayed their trip until the heavens showed a safer alignment. This practice was less about fear and more about harmony. The Subanen believed that traveling against the will of the cosmos meant inviting misfortune, illness, accidents, or even death. To walk beneath a favorable sky, however, was to journey with the blessing of ancestors. This gave every voyage a sacred dimension. Even the act of crossing a river was preceded by a glance upward, ensuring the stars were kind. Such reverence for the night sky transformed navigation into a ritual of trust, binding every step of travel to the eternal order above. The Subanen were not isolated. They traded with neighboring groups, carrying rice, root crops, woven cloth, and forest products to barter for salt, metal tools, or other necessities. These exchanges often required long journeys across challenging terrain, journeys that could not be completed without the guidance of the stars. Traders left their villages at dusk, setting out when the constellations were bright enough to serve as markers. They memorized the position of particular stars relative to mountains or valleys, creating invisible maps that could be read only in the night sky. This celestial compass allowed them to travel confidently, even in unfamiliar territories. Hunters, too, depended on this knowledge. When they ventured deep into forests in search of deer or wild boar, they carried with them not written maps, but stories told by elders about which constellations pointed toward fertile hunting grounds. If they became lost, they simply waited for nightfall, trusting the heavens to guide them back. This system was so effective that even when strangers from other groups visited, they marveled at how easily the Subanen navigated without tools. What outsiders considered mystery was, for the Subanen, ordinary practice, a result of generations of careful observation. This reliance on stars did more than ensure survival. It strengthened identity. Each successful journey confirmed the wisdom of the ancestors, proving that the community's way of life was reliable and enduring. The sky became a symbol of trust, reminding the people that they were never alone, no matter how far they traveled. Navigation did not end with earthly travel. The Subanen believed that the stars also guided souls on their final journey after death. When someone passed away, relatives often spoke of the star path that would carry the spirit to the ancestral realm. This belief transformed grief into reverence. Death was not a vanishing into darkness, but a voyage toward eternal light. Families sometimes stayed awake through the night after a burial, watching the stars and whispering prayers that the departed soul would find its way. The constellations were imagined as gates, each leading to different regions, of the afterlife. A soul that lived with virtue followed a bright and steady star, while a troubled spirit risked being lost in shifting, faint lights. This cosmic vision gave the Subanen a profound sense of continuity. Just as hunters followed constellations to return home, so too did souls follow heavenly patterns to return to their ancestors. The stars were both map and destination, reminding the living that death was not the end, but part of the great cycle of return. This belief shaped moral life, encouraging people to act with kindness and integrity so that their own star path would be clear when the time came. It also brought comfort to those left behind, for they could look upward and feel connected to loved ones who had become part of the eternal canopy. In this way, the Subanen transformed navigation into both a practical and spiritual act. Whether moving through forests, trading across rivers, or journeying into the afterlife, they trusted the stars as their constant guides. The sky was their compass, their road, and their promise, ensuring that no path was ever truly lost. While the stars formed the eternal map of the Subanen, it was the moon that gave rhythm to their days and months. For the Subanen people, the lunar cycle was the most important natural clock. Each phase of the moon was tied to specific activities, guiding farming, rituals, and even daily behavior. The waxing moon, bright and growing, symbolized prosperity, fertility, and beginnings. It was considered the best time to plant seeds, start marriages, and launch new ventures. By contrast, the waning moon was a time of rest, reflection, and caution. People avoided starting major tasks during this phase, believing that decline in the moon's light could bring decline in their efforts. Full moon nights were the most sacred of all. The entire community gathered to celebrate, holding rituals, feasts, and dances beneath the silver glow. Elders reminded the people that the moon was more than a celestial body. It was a witness to their lives, carrying messages between the human world and the spiritual realm. Some stories describe the moon as a guardian spirit, protecting the community during darkness. Others claimed it was the dwelling place of ancestors who looked down lovingly upon their descendants. Whatever the interpretation, the moon was always viewed with reverence. It was the silent partner of the stars, ensuring that time itself moved in harmony with human life. By following lunar cycles, the Subanen created a calendar that required no writing. Farmers looked to the moon to predict rains. Hunters used it to plan expeditions, and mothers reminded children not to wander too far on nights when the moon was hidden. Thus, the moon shaped not only ritual but also practical survival, binding the rhythms of nature to the rhythms of society. Just as the moon structured months, the constellations divided the year into seasons. The Subanen developed an intricate system of star-based timekeeping, with a rising and setting of specific star clusters announced changes in weather and agricultural cycles. For example, the appearance of the Pleiades before dawn signaled the coming of the rainy season, prompting villagers to prepare fields for planting. When Orion's belt dominated the sky at night, it was a sign of hunting abundance, as animals migrated in response to shifting winds and vegetation. These observations, passed down through oral tradition, allowed the Subanen to live in tune with natural cycles without the need for mechanical instruments. The stars also played a role in social organization. Festivals, marriages, and even conflict resolutions were often scheduled according to stellar signs. If a constellation linked to prosperity rose in the east, leaders declared it a favorable time for trade or alliances. If one associated with conflict dominated the sky, they postponed major gatherings, waiting until the heavens suggested harmony. This system ensured that human affairs followed the larger rhythm of the cosmos, reducing conflict and enhancing cooperation. The stars thus acted as a communal calendar, visible to all and respected by all. To the Subanen, this calendar was not abstract, but deeply personal. Each family knew which stars marked the beginning of their planting cycle or their traditional ceremonies. Children memorized these constellations, carrying the calendar in their minds and hearts. Unlike modern systems that rely on paper or digital devices, this calendar could never be lost or destroyed. It was eternal, written in the night sky, renewed every evening with the rising of the stars. The Subanen calendar of moon and stars was more than a system of timekeeping. It was a philosophy of harmony. By aligning their lives with celestial patterns, they ensured balance between human effort and natural order. This belief created a deep sense of belonging, for they were never adrift in time. Every moment, every season, every ritual was connected to a larger cycle that stretched beyond generations. A farmer planting rice did not see himself as merely working the soil. He saw himself participating in a cosmic dance, joining the earth's fertility with the blessings of the heavens. A young couple marrying under the full moon did not see themselves as two individuals alone. They saw themselves as part of a timeless pattern of union repeated since the beginning of creation. This philosophy also provided resilience in the face of hardship. Droughts, floods, or sickness were not seen as random misfortunes, but as reminders of disrupted harmony. The solution was not despair, but restoration, performing rituals, realigning practices, and seeking forgiveness from the ancestors. By returning to the guidance of the stars and moon, the Subanen believed they could re-establish balance, bringing prosperity once again. In this way, the celestial calendar was both practical and spiritual, teaching that survival depended not only on effort, but also on humility before the cosmos. Modern systems of time have separated science from spirituality, but for the Subanen, such division never existed. Their calendar was at once scientific, mythological, moral, and communal. It bound them together as a people, linking their daily lives with eternal rhythms. Every glance at the night sky reminded them that they were participants in something vast, beautiful, and enduring. Through the moon and stars, time itself became sacred, turning ordinary days into chapters of a cosmic story that continues to this day. In Subanen culture, illness was never understood as purely physical. Sickness was often interpreted as an imbalance between the human body, the community, and the cosmic order. The stars, therefore, became a source of diagnosis and cure. When someone fell ill, healers, known as Balian, sometimes performed their work beneath specific constellations believed to carry protective energies. For instance, if a fever persisted, the healer waited until the rise of a bright constellation associated with vitality, then burned herbs while chanting prayers directed at the sky. The smoke was believed to carry the illness away, rising upward to be dissolved among the stars. The lunar cycle also influenced healing practices. Certain remedies were prepared only during waxing moons, when growth and strength were thought to be abundant, while purifications were performed under waning moons, when decline and release symbolized the departure of sickness. Water collected under moonlight was believed to gain power, turning ordinary herbs into extraordinary medicines. This blending of astronomy, spirituality, and herbal knowledge demonstrates how the Subanen saw no boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. Healing was not just restoring the body. It was realigning a person with the universe. Families, too, played a role. When a loved one was sick, they gathered at night to watch the stars, whispering prayers to ancestors for guidance. If a shooting star crossed the sky, they interpreted it as a sign that the request was heard. In this way, even illness became a communal dialogue with the cosmos. The sick were never abandoned. They were carried by both human care and celestial blessing. The Subanen did not see the night sky only as benevolent. Just as there were stars of guidance, they also believed in celestial warnings of danger. Some constellations were considered harbingers of conflict, famine, or spiritual unrest. When these stars rose, the community performed protective rituals to shield themselves from harm. Families lit fires at the edge of their homes, believing the flames, combined with the light of the stars, created a barrier against wandering spirits. Mothers placed charms beneath the sleeping mats of children, charms often blessed beneath moonlight, ensuring safety through the night. Warriors also sought protection from the stars before battle. Elders painted their bodies with symbols drawn from constellations, invoking cosmic strength. Weapons were blessed under the full moon, their blades held toward the sky so that the reflected light carried ancestral power. These acts were not superstition to them. They were affirmations of connection. By aligning human action with celestial rhythm, warriors believed they became part of a force greater than themselves. This conviction gave courage, for they felt the stars marched with them into danger. Even in ordinary life, protective customs abounded. If a bright star flickered strangely, people avoided long journeys, interpreting it as a warning. If the moon was eclipsed, entire communities gathered to make noise with drums and gongs, believing the disturbance would drive away harmful spirits trying to consume the light. Such practices reinforced unity. Fear was transformed into collective strength, and the stars once again became active participants in the survival of the tribe. Underlying all these practices was a deep conviction that the stars were inhabited by the spirits of ancestors. For the Subanen, death did not sever family ties. It merely transformed them. A deceased parent, elder, or leader was believed to ascend into the heavens, becoming part of the cosmic tapestry. Each star was thus not an anonymous light, but a presence, a grandfather watching, a grandmother blessing, a child guiding from above. This belief brought profound comfort to the living. When they looked up at night, they did not feel small or alone. They felt surrounded by kin. This sacred bond shaped rituals of remembrance. Families held feasts under starlight to honor ancestors, leaving portions of food as offerings to those above. Songs were sung that spoke directly to the stars, thanking them for guidance and asking for continued protection. In times of crisis, elders often said, "Look to the heavens. Our ancestors are speaking." This transformed grief into strength, for every hardship was endured with the knowledge that loved ones were still near, glowing eternally in the sky. In this sense, astronomy for the Subanen was not only science and not only myth. It was genealogy, memory, and identity. The sky was their family tree, written in light rather than ink. Each glance upward reconnected them to the generations before and promised continuity for the generations yet to come. This sacred relationship between stars and ancestors remains one of the most powerful legacies of Subanen cosmology, blending survival, spirituality, and love into a single vision of the universe. Festivals in Subanen life were never random. They followed the rhythm of the heavens. The timing of celebrations was guided by the appearance of constellations, the cycle of the moon, and sometimes even rare celestial events such as eclipses or comets. The community believed that festivals were more than human gatherings. They were cosmic appointments. To hold a feast at the wrong time was disrespectful to the ancestors and dangerous to the balance of the world. For this reason, elders carefully studied the skies before announcing any festival. If the stars aligned favorably, drums echoed across the valleys, fires were lit, and entire communities gathered for nights of celebration. One of the most significant was the Harvest Festival, when the constellations associated with fertility reappeared after months of absence. The people rejoiced, for it signaled that their labor had been blessed. Families brought portions of their crops as offerings, laying them before elders who in turn offered prayers beneath the stars. Dancing and singing followed, but all joy was rooted in gratitude. The Subanen believed that without the blessings of the heavens, no harvest could succeed. Thus, every festival became a dialogue with the cosmos. Humans offering thanks, the stars responding with continued light and guidance. This understanding transformed ordinary seasons into sacred cycles of remembrance and renewal. The heart of Subanen festivals was music and dance, performed under the open sky. Bamboo instruments, drums, and gongs echoed through the night, imitating the rhythms of nature itself. The beat of rain, the rustle of wind, the heartbeat of the earth. Dancers moved in circles, imitating the motions of celestial bodies, turning and weaving as though they were stars in orbit. These dances were more than entertainment. They were symbolic reenactments of cosmic harmony. Each step and gesture carried meaning, reminding participants that their lives mirrored the eternal movements above. Storytelling also played a central role. Elders stood before fires and recited myths tied to constellations. Children listened wide-eyed as tales of hunters, lovers, and warriors who became stars filled the night. These stories were not just amusement. They were teaching tools, embedding astronomical knowledge and moral lessons into cultural memory. One story explained why a certain star twinkled unusually because it was a child who laughed too loudly in the heavens. Another described how a cluster of stars represented brothers who never broke their bond, teaching lessons of loyalty. Through such stories, the heavens were made intimate, transforming infinite distance into living memory. Festivals thus blended art, education, and spirituality into one experience. Music and dance united the body with rhythm. Stories united the mind with memory, and the stars united the soul with eternity. In celebrating together under the sky, the Subanen reaffirmed their connection not only to each other, but also to the larger universe that sustained them. For the Subanen, festivals were not only about joy, they were acts of renewal that refreshed the relationship between humanity and the cosmos. Each celebration was a reaffirmation of covenant. Humans honored the stars, and in return, the stars blessed the people. Leaders and star readers played crucial roles in these rituals, standing at the center of gatherings to declare that the heavens had granted permission for the festivities. Their words carried weight, for they were not viewed as mere announcements, but as confirmations that the community's joy was aligned with universal harmony. During these moments, even disputes were resolved. If two families carried grievances, the festival offered a sacred opportunity for reconciliation. Elders reminded them that anger under the light of the stars disrupted cosmic balance. To continue quarreling during a festival was shameful, for it meant disrespecting both ancestors and heavens. As such, many conflicts found closure in these gatherings, reinforcing social unity. Moreover, festivals acted as reminders of resilience. Even after years of hardship, failed harvests, sickness, or conflict, the community gathered again when the stars permitted, declaring that life endured. The stars' reappearance was a promise that darkness never lasted forever. By celebrating in rhythm with the heavens, the Subanen transformed survival into thanksgiving, turning human fragility into cosmic strength. Every festival was therefore a rebirth, a renewal of both spirit and society, reaffirming that the Subanen were not wanderers in chaos, but participants in a divine, star-written order. The Subanen people believed that the heavens never stayed silent when danger approached. Just as the stars guided planting, harvesting, and courtship, they also served as watchmen for times of conflict. Certain constellations were seen as harbingers of unrest. When a group of stars appeared unusually red or flickered in a restless pattern, elders interpreted this as a sign of looming discord, whether among families, neighboring tribes, or even within nature itself. A sudden streak of light across the sky, what we now call a meteor, was not viewed as chance, but as a warning that blood might soon be spilled. Leaders paid close attention to these signals before making decisions about war or defense. The Timue would gather with star readers to observe the night sky. If the heavens reflected harmony, they postponed violence, waiting for a time when cosmic order favored peace. If, however, the signs confirmed unrest, preparations were made swiftly, not with eagerness, but with solemn acceptance. War was never entered lightly, for to fight against the rhythm of the stars was seen as foolish and doomed. Thus, celestial observation became a form of diplomacy, moderating impulses and reminding leaders that their choices had universal consequences. This system also gave the community a sense of preparedness. Ordinary villagers, upon seeing strange behavior in the stars, took precautions, storing food, reinforcing homes, or avoiding travel. In this way, the heavens created collective awareness, uniting everyone in shared vigilance. Even children were taught to watch for changes, ensuring that knowledge of danger was never confined to the elite. The sky was the great equalizer, warning all who looked upward. While some constellations warned of conflict, others were revered as guardians of peace. These were the patterns that shone steady and bright, their calm light interpreted as blessings of harmony. When these stars dominated the sky, the Subanen held councils, made alliances, and resolved disputes, confident that the timing was right. Elders declared such nights as moments when the universe itself extended a hand of reconciliation. During peace rituals, families who had quarreled were encouraged to come together beneath the stars. They shared food, exchanged gifts, and spoke words of forgiveness while gazing upward. The act was symbolic. Just as the stars shone together in balance, so too must human relationships remain united. Leaders reinforced this by reminding the people that conflict was not merely a social issue, but a cosmic disturbance. To hold grudges under peaceful constellations was to disrespect the ancestors and dishonor the heavens. This celestial framework created a powerful culture of accountability. People understood that their actions were always visible, not only to neighbors, but also to the eternal witnesses above. Thus, peace was not enforced by force, but encouraged by shared reverence. Harmony was sustained not through laws carved in stone, but through lights carved in the sky. For the Subanen, this made peace sacred, turning reconciliation into an act of worship. The dual role of the stars, warning of conflict yet blessing peace, taught the Subanen the importance of balance. Life was never seen as purely struggle or purely joy. It was a cycle where both forces coexisted. The night sky reflected this truth. Some nights were filled with turbulence, eclipses, meteors, restless stars, reminders that danger was real. Other nights glowed with serene constellations, affirming that harmony was possible. The people learned that wisdom lay in discerning which season they were in, responding not with stubbornness, but with humility before the cosmos. This philosophy shaped not only individual choices, but also communal resilience. When conflicts did arise, the community accepted them as part of the cosmic rhythm, not as permanent chaos. They fought when necessary, but always with an eye to the heavens, seeking the earliest signs of peace. Victory was never celebrated with arrogance, for it was understood that today's triumph could be tomorrow's downfall if the stars shifted. Likewise, defeat was not absolute, for the stars also promised renewal. In this way, the Subanen created a worldview that prevented despair and arrogance alike. By anchoring human destiny in the cosmos, they maintained a steady perspective. No conflict lasted forever, and no peace could be taken for granted. Both were written in the heavens, reminding them that survival depended not only on strength, but also on wisdom, humility, and alignment with the eternal patterns above. For the Subanen people, justice was not seen as an invention of humans, but as a reflection of the laws of the cosmos. The night sky, steady and eternal, served as a model of fairness. Just as the stars maintained their paths without colliding, so too were humans expected to live without destroying harmony. Disputes between families, quarrels over land, or arguments within clans were often resolved under the stars, with elders invoking celestial order as the highest authority. The Timue, or respected leaders, reminded all that the heavens witnessed every word, and lying under their gaze was not merely dishonesty. It was sacrilege. When two parties came before elders, the session often took place in an open clearing at night. Both sides presented their cases while the constellations shone above. This was more than symbolic. It was a ritual affirmation that truth was not hidden in human hearts alone, but reflected in the cosmos. The belief was that the stars would favor honesty and expose deceit. To act unjustly under the heavens was to invite calamity, whether through failed harvests, sickness, or the disfavor of ancestors. Thus, the stars were not passive backdrops to justice, but active participants, guiding decisions and reinforcing fairness. This system of cosmic justice prevented corruption. Leaders could not easily abuse power, for their authority was tied to the heavens. If they acted unjustly, their rule lost legitimacy, and the community believed the stars themselves would withdraw blessings. In this way, the Subanen created a system of accountability that extended beyond human law. Justice was not fragile. It was eternal, written across the night sky. The Subanen saw their community as a reflection of the heavens. Just as the stars formed constellations, individuals formed families, clans, and tribes. Each person had a role, just as each star had its place. Disorder within society was compared to a constellation breaking apart, unthinkable and dangerous. To preserve harmony, the Subanen practiced rituals of unity, aligning social order with celestial order. Festivals, marriages, and even hunting expeditions were organized with this principle in mind. The Timue, chief, represented the brightest star, guiding the people with wisdom, while elders were seen as surrounding stars, giving stability and support. Ordinary families were compared to smaller stars, no less important, for without them the constellation would be incomplete. This cosmic symbolism created dignity for every individual. Even the humblest farmer or youngest child was seen as part of a greater constellation, necessary for balance. This worldview also extended to responsibilities. Just as stars were believed to influence specific seasons, people too were assigned duties based on their skills and position. Some were protectors, others providers, still others storytellers or spiritual guides. In fulfilling these roles, the community remained strong and aligned with cosmic order. To neglect one's duty was not simply laziness. It was a violation of the harmony of the universe. The Subanen therefore lived with a sense of cosmic accountability, believing that every choice echoed beyond the self into the eternal order. Leadership within Subanen culture was deeply intertwined with astronomy. Atimue did not rule by force, but by alignment with the heavens. Before making decisions, he consulted star readers, ensuring that his judgments reflected cosmic approval. When announcing laws or resolutions, he often stood beneath the night sky, symbolizing that his authority was not his own, but granted by the eternal lights above. This ritual reinforced the idea that leaders were stewards of cosmic order rather than owners of power. A just leader was believed to shine like a bright star, steady and reliable. An unjust leader, however, risked becoming like a falling star, brilliant for a moment but doomed to vanish. This metaphor was often repeated in teachings, warning leaders against arrogance. Authority was sacred but fragile, and its strength depended on harmony with the heavens. Elders, in their wisdom, reminded leaders that their legacy would be judged not by wealth or force, but by whether they preserved balance. This cosmic perspective gave Subanen governance a spiritual depth lacking in many other systems. Decisions were not only practical, but sacred, ensuring that society remained connected to both ancestors and the universe. The Subanen lived with the conviction that as long as their leaders reflected the fairness of the stars, their people would endure. But if leaders ignored cosmic accountability, both society and nature would turn against them. Thus, leadership was always an act of humility, a recognition that true sovereignty belonged not to men, but to the eternal order of the sky. Among the Subanen, myths were not separate from daily life. They were teaching tools, moral codes, and astronomy lessons wrapped into stories. One of the most enduring myths was that of the celestial hunter. According to oral tradition, there was once a skilled hunter who became arrogant, believing no animal could escape his spear. He boasted that his skill was greater than the blessings of the ancestors, and he ignored the rituals meant to honor the spirits of the forest. One night, as punishment, he was lost in the jungle. For days he wandered, unable to find food or shelter. At last, he collapsed under the open sky, instead of letting him perish in shame. The ancestors transformed him into a constellation. His spear became the line of stars we now know as Orion's belt, and his body stretched across the heavens. This story was more than entertainment. It warned listeners against pride and disrespect. It also served as a memory tool, teaching children how to locate Orion in the night sky. Elders used the myth to remind hunters of humility. No matter how skilled, they were still bound to the cosmic order. When hunters saw Orion rise, they remembered not only the season of hunting, but also the moral lesson that arrogance leads to downfall. Thus, a constellation became both a practical marker and a living scripture, binding astronomy and ethics together in one luminous figure above. Another beloved story among the Subanen was the tale of two lovers from rival clans. Forbidden to marry, they met secretly in the forest, swearing eternal loyalty under the stars. When their families discovered their meetings, they tried to separate them, sending guards to watch the lovers and keeping them apart. Heartbroken but determined, the two prayed to the heavens to unite them forever. The ancestors, moved by their devotion, transformed them into twin stars shining side by side. Some said these were Castor and Pollux of the Gemini constellation, while others pointed to two bright stars that never strayed far from each other in the night sky. This myth carried profound meaning. For young people, it symbolized the hope that true love could overcome obstacles. For elders, it served as a reminder that unity was stronger than division. In practical terms, the twin stars also functioned as navigational markers. Travelers used them to orient themselves at night, associating their steady companionship with safe passage. The story ensured that no one forgot their position in the heavens. Even more, it reinforced social values. Love was sacred, but had to align with cosmic approval. By linking human emotion with celestial permanence, the Subanen turned romance into both myth and map, uniting the heart and the stars in a single eternal story. One of the gentlest stories in Subanen tradition spoke of a child who laughed too loudly during a sacred ritual. The spirits, angered by his disruption, caused him to fall ill. His parents, stricken with grief, prayed for mercy. The ancestors decided not to punish, but to bless. They lifted the child into the heavens, where his laughter could be heard forever as twinkling light. This story explained why some stars seemed to flicker. They were the joyful laughter of the child who had become eternal. This myth was told to children both as comfort and lesson. It reminded them that life was fragile, but the cosmos was compassionate. Death was not the end. It was transformation. It also taught discipline, for rituals were sacred and required respect. At the same time, it softened fear of mortality. Parents reassured children that if they died, they too might become stars, continuing to shine down on their loved ones. This story also shaped communal memory. During difficult times, when sickness or famine struck, elders pointed to the flickering stars and said, "The child still laughs. So too must we find joy even in hardship." By anchoring resilience in the sky, the Subanen gave their people strength. Myths like this ensured that the heavens were never empty. They were filled with family, friends, lessons, and hope. Each constellation carried a moral, each flicker a reminder, and each rising star a promise that life, though fragile, was eternal in the embrace of the cosmos. For the Subanen, the stars were not distant ornaments. They were daily guides woven into the fabric of life. A farmer looked to the constellations before planting rice, determining which nights promised fertile rains. Hunters prepared their bows and spears only when the heavens showed favorable signs, avoiding days when the stars appeared unsettled. Mothers reminded their children to observe the moon before journeys, telling them never to travel far during dark nights when a new moon hit its light. Even ordinary household chores carried traces of cosmic rhythm. Washing clothes, preparing food for feasts, or weaving cloth often followed cycles aligned with the heavens. This daily reliance on celestial order gave Subanen society an atmosphere of constant awareness. People did not live in ignorance of the sky. They lived with the sky. Every glance upward reinforced the belief that they were surrounded by guidance. This awareness also created humility. No matter how skilled a person was, they still depended on the stars for direction. A farmer without knowledge of the heavens risked famine. A hunter without guidance risked becoming lost. Thus, astronomy was not optional. It was survival, morality, and identity. The effect was profound. By living in constant relationship with the cosmos, the Subanen cultivated patience and attentiveness. They did not rush decisions, but waited for the right signs. They did not boast of personal achievements, for all success was attributed to cosmic blessing. This lifestyle bound them to an eternal rhythm, turning ordinary tasks into sacred acts of harmony with the universe. Within the home, the influence of the stars was ever present. Parents passed down stories not only as entertainment, but as practical education. A father might take his son outside at night, pointing to constellations and teaching which ones indicated safe seasons for hunting. A mother might lull her child to sleep with a tale of twin stars, ensuring that even in dreams, the child absorbed lessons of loyalty and love. The stars became family members, silent teachers who guided every stage of growth. Marriage customs, too, reflected celestial influence. Before arranging unions, families consulted the heavens. Was Venus bright in the evening sky, symbolizing harmony and fertility? Were constellations associated with discord visible, warning of potential hardship? These questions shaped choices, giving marriages a cosmic foundation. Weddings held under favorable skies were celebrated as eternal unions, blessed not only by families, but by the universe itself. Children born under bright constellations were believed to inherit special virtues, bravery, wisdom, or compassion, while those born during eclipses were thought to carry challenges that required special nurturing. Such beliefs fostered a deep sense of continuity. Families felt that their lives were threads woven into a much larger tapestry, one that stretched across generations and into the heavens. The birth of a child, the joining of a couple, the death of an elder, all were seen as events inscribed not only in memory, but also in the stars. This conviction gave family life a sacred dimension, ensuring that no moment was merely personal. Every joy, sorrow, and milestone carried cosmic weight, binding human life to eternal order. Even trade and commerce in Subanen society reflected celestial rhythms. Market gatherings were not scheduled randomly, but chosen according to signs in the sky. Elders declared which nights were favorable for exchanging goods, ensuring that trade flowed with cosmic blessing. Merchants believed that business conducted under harmonious constellations would flourish, while trade during turbulent skies might end in conflict or loss. This belief fostered trust. Buyers and sellers felt secure knowing that their transactions were aligned with the order of the universe. The stars also guided long-distance traders. Before setting out, they observed the heavens, ensuring that the journey would be protected. A constellation rising in the east was read as a sign of safe passage, while unusual flickering warned of danger ahead. These interpretations influenced not only timing, but also the choice of routes. Traders avoided certain paths when the stars suggested unrest, preferring longer but safer journeys. This system, though rooted in myth, proved effective, preserving both lives and goods. In marketplaces, storytelling often accompanied exchange. A trader might describe how he followed a constellation to reach a distant village, weaving commerce with cosmology. This reinforced identity, reminding everyone that trade was not merely economic, but also spiritual. Goods changed hands, but so did stories, knowledge, and blessings. The marketplace thus became an extension of the sky, a place where human activity mirrored cosmic order. By aligning even material life with the heavens, the Subanen ensured that prosperity was never detached from spirituality. The Subanen did not see the stars in isolation from the earth. For them, the heavens and nature were inseparable, woven together into one living fabric. Rivers were believed to mirror the stars, their flowing waters reflecting constellations as if the sky had descended to earth. Children were told that when they gazed into the water at night, they were looking into a second sky, one that revealed hidden truths. Mountains, too, were viewed as bridges to the heavens. The highest peaks were described as the resting places of the stars, where ancestors sometimes descended to whisper messages to chosen individuals. In practical terms, rivers and mountains were also navigational aids tied to astronomy. Travelers often moved at night, using both the flow of rivers and the alignment of stars to orient themselves. Hunters camped by streams where certain constellations rose, knowing that water, food, and shelter were nearby. These practices reflected the Subanen worldview. Nature and cosmos were not separate realms, but complementary guides. To follow the river was to follow the stars. To climb a mountain was to ascend closer to the ancestors. This belief strengthened environmental respect. To pollute a river was to dishonor the stars reflected within it. To cut a sacred tree on a mountain was to sever ties with the heavens above. Thus, cosmic reverence translated into ecological responsibility. The Subanen were guardians of both sky and earth, believing that harmony between them sustained life. This worldview kept their society deeply connected to natural cycles, ensuring survival while preserving sacred landscapes for generations. Animals, too, were linked to the stars in Subanen thought. Many constellations were imagined as animals that guided or warned the people. A cluster resembling a boar reminded hunters of abundance, while a group shaped like a bird symbolized migration and freedom. These constellations were not random. They were teaching tools, helping the community understand animal behavior through cosmic storytelling. Hunters watched the skies to anticipate movements of game. If a constellation associated with deer rose earlier than expected, it was believed the animals would travel soon, prompting hunters to prepare. Fishermen studied the moon's phases to predict when rivers and lakes would yield the best catch, connecting lunar cycles with aquatic abundance. Domestic animals also carried celestial significance. Dogs were said to bark more during certain lunar nights because they could see spirits moving between the stars and the earth. Chickens were believed to crow in rhythm with star positions, their voices announcing cosmic transitions. These associations reinforced a worldview where humans were never alone in the cosmos. Animals were partners, their lives interwoven with stellar rhythms. This created ethical boundaries in hunting and farming. To take more than what was permitted by the heavens was considered a violation of balance. Elders taught children to hunt only under favorable constellations, ensuring that respect guided necessity. In this way, the stars became guardians of sustainable living, ensuring that animals remained part of the eternal cycle of life. The forests of Mindanao, vast and ancient, were seen by the Subanen as sacred extensions of the night sky. Each towering tree was described as a pillar of the heavens, holding up the firmament. Cutting trees without ritual permission was dangerous, for it risked collapsing the balance between earth and stars. Before felling a tree, families performed ceremonies under starlight, asking forgiveness from both forest spirits and celestial guardians. Only when signs appeared favorable, such as a calm moon or a steady constellation, did they proceed. This ritual ensured that the act of taking from nature was always balanced by reverence and responsibility. The forest canopy itself was viewed as a mirror of the heavens. Just as stars formed constellations, trees formed sacred groves, each with its role in sustaining balance. Elders spoke of how certain groves aligned with particular constellations, creating bridges between earth and sky. To walk through such places at night was to feel the presence of both ancestors and cosmic forces. These beliefs created protective practices. Sacred groves were preserved, hunting was restricted, and rituals of gratitude were performed before entering the forest. This covenant between forest and stars was both spiritual and practical. It preserved biodiversity, prevented overexploitation, and reinforced unity with the cosmos. The Subanen believed that as long as they honored both sky and forest, their people would thrive. But if they broke this covenant, disaster, floods, droughts, or sickness would surely follow. By aligning ecology with astronomy, They created a philosophy of survival that remains timeless. To live is to honor the bond between nature and the stars. Every culture has its explanation of how the world began, and for the Subanen, creation was written in the heavens. Elders told stories of a time when the sky and earth were not separate, but woven together in one great blanket of light. In those days, humans, animals, and spirits all spoke the same language, and the stars moved freely among the people. But pride and conflict disrupted this harmony. According to one tale, a group of humans tried to climb into the sky to seize the stars for themselves, hoping to control the rhythms of time and destiny. Angered by this arrogance, the ancestors lifted the stars higher, beyond human reach, and separated the sky from the earth. From that moment onward, the stars became eternal guides, but no longer lived among mortals. This myth explained not only the distance of the stars, but also humanity's dependence on them. Because humans once tried to control cosmic power, they were now bound to live humbly, reading signs rather than ruling them. The story taught a vital lesson. Wisdom comes not from domination, but from reverence. The separation of sky and earth was both punishment and gift. It humbled humans, but also gave them the eternal presence of stars as guides. In this way, creation was not seen as a single event, but as an ongoing relationship, with humanity learning from the heavens each night. Another Subanen story of creation spoke of the eternal dance between the sun, moon, and stars. In the beginning, they were siblings who shared the same sky. The sun, however, was proud and demanded to shine alone. The moon, gentle and quiet, withdrew in sadness, choosing to appear only at night. The stars, countless and humble, sided with the moon, scattering across the darkness to keep her company. From then on, the sun ruled the day, the moon ruled the night, and the stars served as companions, balancing pride with humility. This myth carried profound symbolic meaning. It taught that leadership, like the sun, must be tempered by compassion, like the moon, and supported by community, like the stars. If one force dominated, the balance of the world would collapse. The cycle of day and night thus became a cosmic lesson in governance and morality. Elders repeated this story during disputes, reminding leaders not to act with pride, but to share power and respect others. It also gave the people a way to understand eclipses. When the sun and moon crossed paths, elders explained that the siblings were visiting one another, reminding the world of their shared bond. These moments were sacred, and people gathered to honor the reunion, beating drums to protect the moon from jealous spirits. By embedding natural events into myth, the Subanen created a worldview where the cosmos was not distant or mechanical, but alive, filled with relationships and emotions that mirrored human life. At the heart of Subanen creation myths was the question of humanity's role in the grand order. Unlike some traditions that saw humans as rulers of the world, the Subanen believed they were caretakers, participants in a larger design. The stars reminded them nightly that their lives were part of something greater. Humans did not control destiny, they aligned with it. To live well was to read the heavens carefully, to honor ancestors, and to preserve harmony between earth and sky. This humility gave their culture resilience. In times of famine, they did not curse the stars, but sought to understand what lesson was being taught. In times of abundance, they did not grow arrogant, but offered thanksgiving, knowing blessings flowed from cosmic balance. The myths of creation thus shaped ethics, guiding people to act with patience, respect, and reverence. Furthermore, these stories created identity. By tracing their origins to cosmic events, the Subanen saw themselves as children of the stars. Each person carried within them a spark of celestial light, a reminder that their lives mattered not only to their families and communities, but also to the universe. This gave even the simplest acts, planting a seed, telling a story, sharing food, a cosmic dimension. Humanity's place was not to dominate the earth, but to join in the eternal dance of creation, living as humble partners of the stars. For the Subanen, the night sky was not only a realm of gods and spirits, it was the dwelling place of their ancestors. Each star represented a soul that had once lived on Earth and now shone above as a guiding presence. This belief transformed grief into reverence. When a parent or elder passed away, families did not see it as an ending, but as a transformation into light. The star that flickered brightest on the night of death was often named after the departed, and the family would point to it for generations, saying, "There is our grandfather, there is our mother, there is our child." This practice ensured that memory was never lost. The sky became a living genealogy, a family tree written in radiant points of light. Elders taught children that they were never alone, for the ancestors walked with them every night. A person might pray to the star of a departed relative before planting crops, asking for blessings. A hunter might whisper to his father's star before entering the forest. A young bride might look up at her grandmother's star during her wedding, feeling her presence. Through these practices, the Subanen maintained an unbroken connection between the living and the dead, binding generations together under the canopy of eternity. This cosmology also created accountability. People believed that ancestors were always watching, not as harsh judges, but as loving guardians. Wrongdoing was not hidden, for it would shame not only oneself, but also the ancestors shining above. This belief strengthened moral life, ensuring that traditions of honesty, respect, and generosity endured. In this way, the stars were not distant. They were family, eternal and luminous, guiding every choice. To honor their ancestors, the Subanen performed rituals beneath the night sky. These were not occasional acts, but regular ceremonies woven into the rhythm of life. During harvest, families prepared portions of rice and offered them outdoors, lifting the food toward the stars before eating. The gesture symbolized gratitude not only to the spirits of the land, but also to ancestors whose blessings made survival possible. During times of sickness, families gathered at night to call upon ancestral stars for healing, believing their light carried protective power. Funerary rituals were especially significant. When someone passed away, relatives often stayed awake through the night, keeping vigil under the stars. They sang ancestral chants, their voices rising into the sky as if carried directly to the new star soul. Torches were lit, not only to illuminate the night, but also to mimic the starlight above, symbolizing the union of earth and heaven. Weeks or months later, families continued to honor the departed by visiting open clearings where stars were most visible, holding feasts, and telling stories of their loved one's life. These acts preserved memory while strengthening belief that the dead were never lost. They were always present in the firmament. Children grew up participating in these rituals, ensuring continuity. From a young age, they learned to identify which stars represented their family members. A child who felt lonely could look upward and say, "That is my grandfather watching me." This sense of eternal companionship brought comfort in hardship and courage in danger. It reminded every Subanen that life was short but never meaningless, for each life eventually joined the radiant chorus of the night sky. The Subanen did not see ancestors as passive memories. They were active mediators between humans and the cosmos. When storms threatened, families prayed to ancestral stars to shield the community. When disputes arose, elders invoked the presence of ancestors, reminding everyone that their lights demanded harmony. This belief kept the community united. Disrespecting one another was equivalent to dishonoring the ancestors who shone above, and such shame was unbearable. Leaders also drew authority from this belief. A Timue might declare that his guidance was not his alone, but inherited from the wisdom of ancestral stars. His legitimacy rested on continuity, showing that he did not rule for himself, but as a representative of generations before him. Similarly, star readers claimed no personal power. They interpreted what the ancestors were already saying through the constellations. This system ensured that leadership and knowledge were always rooted in lineage, humility, and continuity. Most importantly, the ancestors served as reminders of destiny. By looking upward, the Subanen saw not only their past, but also their future. They believed that one day they too would join the stars, becoming guardians for the generations to come. This belief encouraged responsibility, for each life added a new light to the sky. To live well was to shine brightly after death, guiding descendants with honor. To live selfishly or dishonorably was to risk fading into darkness, leaving no light behind. In this way, the Subanen vision of ancestors created a profound philosophy of life. To live was to prepare to become a star, to join the eternal constellation of family and community. Among the Subanen, eclipses were never ordinary events. They were moments when the balance of the cosmos seemed threatened, when the sun or moon, symbols of life and order, were swallowed by shadow. Elders explained that such disturbances revealed tensions between cosmic beings. Some said the eclipse was caused by a great serpent trying to devour the light, while others believed it was the ancestors reminding the people to renew their reverence. During these rare nights, the community gathered together, beating drums and gongs, shouting, and making noise to drive away the spirit of darkness. The act was both protective and unifying, for it reminded everyone that survival depended on collective action, just as cosmic harmony depended on balance between light and shadow. Practically, eclipses also served as markers of change. Elders often declared that an eclipse foreshadowed transitions, new leadership, shifts in weather, or even the birth of significant children. These interpretations gave weight to the phenomenon, embedding natural astronomy into cultural prophecy. For families, it was a time of caution. They avoided starting journeys, planting, or marriages during an eclipse, waiting instead for the light to return. The eclipse symbolized not only danger, but also renewal. Once the light reemerged, life could begin again with greater blessing. Thus, celestial disturbances were not feared blindly, but understood as messages. The Subanen believed the heavens did not act without reason. Every shadow across the moon or sun carried meaning, urging people to reflect on their actions and restore harmony. This conviction turned even unsettling events into opportunities for spiritual growth, ensuring that fear became a lesson rather than despair. The sudden streak of a comet or the blazing fall of a meteor was seen as a direct message from the heavens. These rare and dramatic events could not be ignored. Elders taught that comets were messengers of change, heralding either prosperity or hardship, depending on the constellations that accompanied them. A comet appearing near peaceful stars was read as a promise of blessing, perhaps abundant harvests or alliances between clans. But if it crossed turbulent constellations, it warned of conflict, illness, or famine. Meteors, on the other hand, were often interpreted as the movement of ancestral spirits. When a shooting star flashed across the sky, families whispered prayers, believing a soul was journeying to or from the earth. Some said it was an ancestor bringing blessings. Others said it was a restless spirit seeking peace. Either way, the site was always sacred. Children were told never to mock or point rudely at a meteor, for it carried the dignity of the ancestors. Instead, they clasped their hands and made wishes, trusting the heavens to hear. These interpretations made cosmic events into communal experiences. No meteor passed unnoticed. No comet crossed without meaning. Villagers gathered to discuss the signs, sharing stories of what their elders once said during similar events. By embedding astronomy into cultural memory, the Subanen ensured that the sky was never silent. Every unusual light became a chapter in their living scripture, guiding choices and reminding them of their place in the eternal flow of time. Underlying all Subanen interpretations of celestial signs was the belief in cycles. Time was not linear but circular, a repeating rhythm where decline led to renewal and darkness gave way to light. The stars and moon revealed this truth nightly. The waning moon always returned to fullness. Constellations disappeared only to rise again, and even eclipses ended with restored brilliance. This cosmic rhythm gave the Subanen resilience. No famine was permanent, no sickness eternal, no conflict without end. Just as the stars moved in cycles, so too did human life. This philosophy shaped how they faced adversity. Instead of despairing in hardship, they asked, "What lesson does the sky teach us now?" Instead of boasting in prosperity, they said, "The cycle will turn again. Let us remain humble." Such thinking prevented extremes of arrogance or hopelessness. It created balance, encouraging patience in struggle and gratitude in success. Elders reinforced this teaching with rituals. At the end of each season, they held feasts under the stars, thanking the heavens for the past and preparing for the cycle to come. In this way, the Subanen turned the sky into both calendar and teacher. Time was not measured in abstract numbers, but in living rhythms, each linked to celestial movement. The eternal cycle reminded them that their lives were part of a grand design, where endings were beginnings and loss was renewal. To live in harmony with the cosmos was to trust the cycle, to endure with patience, and to celebrate with gratitude. The Subanen saw themselves not as masters of time, but as dancers within its eternal circle, moving in rhythm with the stars. For the Subanen, the night sky was not just a map of seasons and navigation. It was also a book of prophecy. Elders and star readers believed that certain celestial patterns foreshadowed events before they occurred. If constellations shifted suddenly, or if the moon displayed unusual colorations, it was interpreted as a message of change. Red-tinted moons often meant conflict or bloodshed. Unusually bright constellations indicated abundance, and faint, trembling stars suggested sickness or famine. These signs were not taken lightly. Leaders convened councils to interpret their meaning, and decisions about warfare, alliances, or planting were made accordingly. The prophetic role of the stars gave the community a sense of preparation. They did not walk blindly into the future, but read signs of what might come. This shaped their worldview profoundly. Destiny was not random, but guided. Yet humans still had responsibility. If the stars warned of hardship, the people acted with caution, storing food or delaying journeys. If the heavens promised abundance, they worked diligently to prepare fields and trade routes. In this way, prophecy was not fatalistic, but participatory. The cosmos revealed possibilities, and humanity responded with wisdom. This gave life meaning, for every act was part of a greater dialogue with the stars. Beyond visible signs, the Subanen also believed that stars spoke through dreams. Elders taught that when people slept, their souls could rise to the sky, wandering among constellations and receiving messages from ancestors. A dream of walking beneath bright stars was considered a blessing, a sign of guidance. A dream of being lost in darkness or chased by shadows suggested the dreamer was out of balance and needed ritual cleansing. Star readers often interpreted such dreams alongside actual celestial events, weaving together both visible and invisible messages. This belief made dreaming sacred. Parents encouraged children to share their dreams in the morning, listening carefully for hidden meanings. Leaders also valued dreams as prophetic, sometimes delaying decisions until a trusted elder dreamt of favorable signs. The blending of astronomy and dreams created a worldview where the mind, body, and cosmos were inseparable. Sleep was not simply rest. It was communication with the heavens. Through this, the Subanen ensured that guidance came not only from experts but from the entire community. Anyone could dream. Therefore, anyone could receive a message. This democratized prophecy, making every person a potential voice of cosmic wisdom. While elders held authority to interpret, the raw experience belonged to all. This strengthened unity, for everyone shared responsibility in listening to the heavens, awake or asleep. Though the Subanen believed destiny was written in the stars, they also understood that human beings had freedom to choose how they responded. A prophecy of famine was not an unchangeable curse. It was a warning to prepare. A sign of conflict was not a command to fight. It was an invitation to seek peace before disaster struck. In this way, the Subanen worldview balanced destiny with agency. The stars revealed paths, but humans decided how to walk them. This philosophy prevented despair. Even in times when signs seemed ominous, people found courage by asking, "What can we do to realign with the heavens?" Rituals of cleansing, acts of reconciliation, or offerings of thanksgiving were all ways to restore balance. The stars gave guidance, but it was human humility and effort that transformed warnings into survival. At the same time, the belief preserved humility in prosperity. If the stars promised abundance, and it came true, people did not boast of their own power. They offered thanks, recognizing that blessings flowed from harmony, not from pride. Leaders reminded the community, the stars write, but we must read with care. This teaching made the Subanen resilient, patient, and wise. Destiny was not a chain that bound them, but a compass that pointed the way. By following it with reverence, they ensured that their lives carried meaning, woven into the eternal fabric of the cosmos. As the Subanen looked upon the sky generation after generation, they did not merely see beauty. They saw teachers, silent, patient, eternal. The stars had instructed their ancestors on when to plant, when to harvest, when to journey, and when to rest. They had guided hunters through forests, traders across rivers, and leaders through the complex paths of governance. Each flicker carried meaning, each constellation a lesson. The Subanen never separated knowledge from reverence. They believed that wisdom came not from owning the world, but from listening to it. Thus, astronomy was never only about stars. It was about humility, balance, and respect. For children, the stars became their first classroom. Sitting by the fire while elders pointed at constellations, they learned geography, seasons, ethics, and faith all at once. They learned that arrogance led to downfall, as in the tale of the hunter turned into Orion. They learned that love was eternal, as in the myth of the twin stars who defied their clans. They learned that laughter could live forever, as in the flickering child star. Every lesson in life was mapped above them, shining night after night. Even in hardship, when crops failed or sickness spread, the stars whispered resilience. This too shall pass. The cycle will return. In this way, the heavens became both library and scripture, reminding each generation that their story was part of something vast and timeless. The Subanen belief that ancestors became stars gave their culture a profound sense of continuity. Death was not an end, but a transformation. Families could look upward and feel the presence of those they loved, guiding them still. This conviction gave courage in hardship and humility in prosperity. No one acted alone, for every deed was witnessed by ancestors shining above. Leaders reminded their people that their legitimacy came not from personal ambition, but from ancestral approval. A Timue who acted justly was like a steady star, constant and reliable. One who abused power was like a falling star, brilliant but fleeting, destined to vanish. This belief also gave every person a sense of destiny. To live well was to become a star that would shine for future generations. To live selfishly was to risk fading into darkness, leaving no light behind. Thus, morality was not enforced by fear of punishment, but by longing for eternal honor. People desired to join the constellation of ancestors, to add their light to the family of stars above. This cosmic genealogy bound the Subanen to their past and future alike, making every life sacred. Through rituals of remembrance, storytelling, and prayer, they kept this legacy alive. Children grew up knowing which stars belonged to their family. They were taught to wave at them, to whisper prayers, to ask for courage. This intimacy with the heavens ensured that the Subanen never felt abandoned, no matter how difficult their journey. Their ancestors, eternal and radiant, were always watching, always guiding. At the heart of Subanen cosmology was a covenant. Humans would honor the stars, and the stars would guide humanity. This covenant was not written in stone, but in light. It was renewed every night when families lifted their eyes to the heavens. Every season when farmers aligned their planting with constellations. Every ritual when elders invoked celestial blessings. The stars reminded them of humility, teaching that humans were small but not insignificant. They reminded them of resilience, showing that darkness always gives way to light. They reminded them of unity, proving that just as stars shine together in constellations, so too must humans live in harmony. This covenant gave meaning to existence. The Subanen did not fear the future, for they trusted the eternal rhythms of the cosmos. They did not despair in loss, for they knew their loved ones lived as stars. They did not boast in triumph, for they understood that blessings came from harmony, not pride. Their worldview was simple yet profound. Life is part of a greater cycle, written in the sky since the beginning of time. And so, when a Subanen child looked upward, they did not see emptiness. They saw teachers, ancestors, guardians, and destiny itself. The stars were not silent. They were alive with meaning. To live was to read them faithfully, to act with humility, to love with devotion, and to walk always in harmony with their eternal light. This is the legacy of the Subanen, a people who found their identity not in conquering the earth, but in honoring the heavens, carrying their story across generations as surely as the stars carry light across eternity. Tonight, we have walked together beneath the same sky that guided the Subanen for generations. We discovered how the stars shaped their daily lives, blessed their marriages, guided their journeys, healed their sickness, and even carried their ancestors into eternity. We heard their myths of hunters turned into constellations, lovers united as twin stars, and children whose laughter still twinkles in the heavens. We saw how eclipses and comets became signs of destiny, and how leadership, justice, and morality were never apart from the eternal order above. And what is the moral of this story? That life is fragile, but never meaningless. That humility, gratitude, and harmony are the keys to survival. That every human being carries a spark of light, and one day, we too will become part of the constellation of our ancestors, guiding those who come after us. If this journey touched you, then remember, there are many more stories waiting to be told. This was only one voice of the past, one people's eternal wisdom. On History Teller YT, we will continue to explore the untold stories, the hidden legacies, and the forgotten truths that shaped our world. So, subscribe, stay connected, and join me again. Because history is not dead. It is alive, written in the stars, and waiting for us to listen.